Welcome, everyone, to today's episode where we are going to dive into the power of retreat and why stepping away from our daily lives is the gateway to accessing more of our inner knowing and wisdom. So, we all know why this matters. In our world where we are constantly connected, we rarely give ourselves the space to stop and listen and hear our own voice telling us what is true for us. So today I have with me Amy Shine, who's an incredible embodiment facilitator and teacher, and we dive into a lot of different things. The unique energetic shifts that happen only when we're in immersive environments, and how when you're in a community, how that accelerates growth, and what's going on in the brain, in the neural pathways, in the energetic shifts in the nervous system that allows us to recalibrate and transform in a totally different way. Enjoy the show. All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here today on Shift Your Vibe to Thrive podcast. And today I get to have Amy Shine on as my guest, who is not only an amazing friend, but also a really potent embodiment facilitator. And we're going to talk today about the power of retreats and when stepping away consciously from your daily day-to-day environment, how that's a gateway to accessing your inner wisdom and knowing. So welcome, Amy. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I want to start with asking you about a story that you have, like a personal experience with this, when you've had a retreat experience that really changed your perspective and probably more. And I know we've chatted about one of those experiences. I don't know if you're going to mention that one or another, but can you just to give people a sense of, what you've experienced with that?
Yeah, I mean, I've had many experiences of, retreats and 7-day events that both you and me have been at. Probably the most recent one that really like ripple changed massively into my world, into every area of my world it was an 8-day retreat in Scotland 2 summers ago. Um, and I didn't know anything about the facilitator. I knew the body of work that we were going to be doing. That was it. And I knew it was in Scotland. And it ended up being like twenty of us, one man, the rest were all women. It was a lot of Scottish women, a few English women, one or two from Europe. And I was the only Irish person, but I traveled from Florida. And then the facilitator ended up being American. But what happened was we were in nature, first of all. Like, I mean, stripped of all the like bougie stuff and comforts we like. We were up in like the west of Scotland. We're on this farm. We're in these little cottages, like 3 bedrooms in every cottage. I was sharing a room with a woman from South Africa, but she lived in Edinburgh, and I didn't know her. I didn't know anyone at this retreat, so I'm sharing a room, right? And in these tiny rooms with like two small twin beds. It reminded me of when I was younger. Like I had a small twin bed in my
Me
room because
too.
I was like the youngest girl. Um, we food everything was included. Like our food was included. So all we had to do was get there. And once we were there, like there wasn't much Wi-Fi. We were in the middle of nowhere, and we were really just immersed in nature every day. We were doing this energy healing every day, body work, and we had some movement, but like, oh my God, I think it was like by day 3 or day 4, I just had like the biggest breakthrough. And I started to wake up to a lot of things that like I'd been questioning, that I had doubts about. I started to see like the truth, you know? I started to see like what I was avoiding, what the things I was like lying to myself about. And I would say what really brought on that change for me was the fact that I was in a safe place. And that was
Mm.
massive. That was the biggest like thing that I noticed when I arrived was like these women were so heart-centered. They were so just themselves. There was no superiority. There was no hierarchy. Even the facilitator who was a leader in the body of work she was teaching, really a mother to the body of work, had no superiority in her world. She didn't talk down to us. She didn't create separation between like I'm the teacher and you're the student. She had such as just a there was just no ego. There was just no, and that melted my world. And she opened up the training and the retreat with like, I don't own this work. Nobody owns this. And I was just like, my whole body just melted. And I was just like, oh my God, thank you. Because I was just, so used to being in a world where everything was owned by someone or copyrighted or controlled and I had been very used to also being in environments where there was a lot of superiority and separation.
Mm.
And so what happened to me is that my body started to relax and I started to feel safe. And I started to notice that I just felt comfortable in this space. Like, and a lot of these things I would have before when I was in groups and events like this, they weren't there. Like, I didn't feel separate. I didn't feel alone. I didn't feel like I was being left out. I didn't feel like really wrong and bad about myself. And that was that's when I really started to realize, wow, like there's really something different here. Like it was just so heart-centered and heart-led that I got to really let go. And I then had to shed my ego, about who I thought I was or what I did in the world. Like none of that mattered in this place, in this space. Like it wasn't about status or who you were as a teacher or facilitator, or where you were in your journey. It was just really about this group of people group of women mainly coming together and just receiving,
Hmm.
connecting,
You know,
and surrendering. Sorry.
totally. No, I just, it's interesting as you're talking and you're talking about how you just felt really safe in that environment. Um, as I was looking, as we were knowing that we were going to have this conversation on the podcast and looking at, what is different when we go outside of our norm, and travel somewhere, whether that's near or far, but really immerse ourselves in just basically a new environment. What's happening and what's essential for those like big transformations to take place, like you mentioned. And one of the key things is our nervous system is like always scanning our environment to look for cues of, am I safe? And when we enter a new environment, one, the nervous system is like, okay, what is going on here, right? And this is all happening outside of conscious awareness. It's sort of just going on automatically. Because in familiar environments, where we almost function on like there's prediction of what's going to happen, habit, all the things that run on autopilot. But when we enter an environment that actually is designed to create safety, because a really well-designed retreat is designed for that. So you step in, you're like, I don't know, I just feel really taken care of and nurtured, and all my meals are taken care of, and these people are just here and being really authentic. They say that our nervous system literally switches to a different, they call it like adaptive learning state, where basically our brains that have this capacity to make new neural connections, like when we talk about neuroplasticity, gets turned on. Because if there's safety there and it's new and the environment goes, oh, like our brains basically go, they shift into a state where we take in new information in a different way. And I think we've all, like most of us have experienced that at some, even if it's a business conference or something, we go into it with a different frame of mind. There's new people, there's new environment, and we often have the intention or request in our world like, okay, this is different, I'd like to get something out of this, whether we know specifically what that is or not. But I think that's really beautiful to mention, that difference and how it allowed you then to receive the relationships, the information, the transformation, the ahas in a different way, because the body was able to relax and go, oh, I'm in a safe space where I can process things differently and take a bigger perspective.
Yeah, you get to like really like when you read your environment as safe, then you get to your mind relaxes, but so then does your body. And then when your mind relaxes and your body relaxes, then you can let go of like the image that you've been carrying, like the protective barriers. And we all have our own defense mechanisms to survive in the world. But the beautiful thing is when you come together in a retreat and it's an intimate space and the space is nurtured, then you can let go of those defense mechanisms. And that's where it was like death by ego. It was like I
Yeah.
had like many ego deaths there. um and I think it's also beautiful to gather in a space with people that you don't know as well, because it's like you don't have to be something. You don't have to play the role that, like when you show up every day, say you show up with your family, you show up in your job, you show up as a wife or a partner or a husband, like whatever it is, the roles that you play, like there's certain like mannerisms you take on for that, and there's certain roles you play. And so it's hard, like when you're playing, when you're always in those, to know like who are you beyond all that. And I think that's why it's so beautiful to come together in a retreat environment without those, like move yourself out of that environment. Right now we're not in the home anymore. Like again, it's like you wake up in the morning, everything is familiar, so you think right away, what must I do for the day? Like your home, when you're in your home, you're thinking about, I must clean the windows, I must put on the washing, I must go get the food for the dinner. Like, but when you're out, when you take yourself and you remove yourself out of that environment and you put yourself in a space that you haven't been before, like, Scotland, Bali, wherever it is, first of all, your senses are totally heightened because you're being stimulated in a new environment, new space, new everything. And then you're not having to play those roles that you play every day in your life anymore. So now you're getting to look at what's really there, like what's really going on, and like who am I really beyond being a mother, a facilitator, whatever, the roles that you play.
I love that because I actually leave on this next coming Monday for a retreat in San Diego. And I know a couple of the people virtually, right? And I had one of the women reached out to me and she said, "Would you like to put each other down? Like, because it's all shared rooms, like you mentioned, we're going to be sharing an individual, like a bedroom." Um, and she said, "I won't take offense if you don't want to." And I actually replied back, I said, I know I'm already going to connect with you because I know you from, it might be Zooms, but there's lots of people there that I really have had no previous interaction with. And I was like, I kind of like to open that up to see like who I get paired with and bring and meet another person because there is, and she was like, "I'm so glad you said that." I kind of felt the same the same way too, because there is this gift of when you don't come in with any expectations of who that person is and you don't know them, it does allow you, like you said, to drop the normal like identities, masks we wear going about our daily life because people expect us to show up a certain way if they know us, and then we match that, and when that gets to be totally fresh. I mean, that's why I loved traveling when I was my whole life. And when I was younger, I got that travel bug because it was so exciting to be in a new environment and meeting new people and getting to meet everybody fresh. Like, I don't know what you do for your job or where you've come from, but I get to just meet you here in this present moment and you do me too. And there was so much freedom and choice in that because I think it puts you very much in that present moment, like you said, to see like what is there that day and who are you really and what's without all of that. Hey guys, it's Emily, and I'm just popping in here for a moment to ask you a question. Have you ever had that feeling where you're craving more connection with yourself, going in, but meditation feels impossible and other practices either feel too intense or like they're just not working? I get it. That's why I created Coming Home to You, which is a monthly breathwork membership where transformation unfolds naturally at your perfect pace. Each month includes a 30-minute rejuvenation session and a 60-minute deep dive breath journey, plus community support and recorded sessions that you can access anytime, anywhere. And as a trauma-informed breathwork facilitator, I'm here to guide you to create that sense and feeling of coming home to yourself, where your intuition and knowing flow and choices become clear. If you're ready to experience the magic, visit emilyevansrussell.com/breathe to join us. because sometimes the simplest path home to you is through your breath.
Yeah, and also didn't know anyone at all at this retreat. And the difference between going to something like that to events where I went where I knew lots of people was a big difference. And that's again where you see like, because people have projections of you. Everyone does. It's just reality, right?
Yeah.
People have projections of who Amy is, who Emily is. And when they meet you, you can feel those projections in their world. Or if they already know you, they have projections based on knowing you. And then we're so energetic, we just become those projections. So that's why it's so beautiful to travel because you meet people who don't have any reference point for you, so the projections aren't there, and that's where you do get to kind of like drop any role or facade. And it's not even a facade, it's just like you become known for something or you become the worker or the facility, like whatever it is, and you can drop all that and you can look at, and that's what I mean, like, because all of that still comes a lot from the mind, and it's like drop into the heart, like who are you really when you're coming from your heart. And I also just want to mention too, like there's something profound, and I think you and me have talked a little bit about it, where we looked at like, okay, so what happens when you do something online? Like I'm online with your breathwork um membership, or like you do you're online with my chakra movement membership.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, we do these things online, and you get this taste of this is amazing. I love how this feels. I feel great after it. I love doing this. And you have your monthly, weekly practice. And then maybe you have, a private session. And again, amazing. You get like this private one-on-one intention. Um, and then, but to move on from that, like, what's the difference between like having these kind of online experiences and sessions and then actually being in a space for 7 days? And what I noticed was, so I had been to sessions and received this body of work, and then I went and did a 7 day retreat training with it. So every single day, we had multiple sessions of this body work every day. And that's where I realized that also is a massive part of the transformation. It's like when you're in a space for 7 days, uninterrupted, you don't have the other roles you're playing, you're not playing mother, worker, all the things. You're just immersed in nature. You don't have the outside distractions of the world coming at you, and you get to receive the body work, the breath work, the movement, and then you get to have the conversations with people and the connections. Like there's a transformation that happens in that in-person 7 day events that I just don't see it online.
Yeah. Well, it can, I mean, it's just different. It can't actually, because no matter what's going on, you step back into your daily life after that. And, they even say, and I think we've all experienced this, when you create a physical what not, easy for me to say, distance from something, it also gives you mental distance and space, right? So when you actually get out of your familiar environment, you get a bigger perspective because you're able to both literally physically have some distance between you and your normal situations and the things that are triggering you and the challenges. And it gives you this mental space from it. And then I was just reading, they actually did a study of a meditation retreat that is exactly what you're talking about. That inside 4 days, okay, you're not meditating 24 hours a day or the 12 hours you're awake. You're maybe doing like an hour session and maybe another one in the evening. And they measured people's brain waves, and the meditative state continued while they were at lunch with people, while they were it, because there's such a powerful, I mean, I would say like group coherence of what's going on, that once you set that energetic state and people are there to be like show up, have the courage to be vulnerable, transform, and you have all of that energy together in a safe container, and then that's amplified so that you don't just have an amazing session and go back to your life, which of course you're going to go back to your daily stressors and everything going on and who you are, but you get to continue that state of coherence and presence even when you're not, quote, in the session.
Yeah, I think we both really saw that in Costa Rica too when we did a retreat together in Costa Rica.
Yeah.
we saw that like it wasn't just the sessions that we were doing, it wasn't just the movement or the breath work or the energy healing, it was also us all going together, like whitewater rafting, horse riding, eating breakfast, eating lunch together. It was like it was continuing on, it didn't stop. So
Yeah.
it's interesting they did that study. And like
Yeah.
even if you look, Joe Dispenza, like he does 7 day
Hmm.
events. So there is something about the 7 days, like doing something repeatedly every day for 7 days out of your usual physical environment.
Yeah. And what I found too, I mean, you said, with the example you gave, hey, on like day 3 or 4, I had this big kind of like everything melted in this big transformation.
Well, it's
And
the dark night of the soul. That's actually what I had.
and and that can be intense, but you're also supported in a different way too, where I've had days or sessions where I've had some big like explosion in my world and then be like, oh my God, and I have to go back and make dinner for my girls. Like, I don't know if I can keep it together. And it's so nice when you are in a setting like that where you're like, thank God I can let this unravel.
Yeah,
Right?
you can break
Yeah.
down, you can have a breakthrough, you can, you know what I mean? You can just have a whole like, what the hell, like coming to Jesus moment, like where like you're just, it's like transformation is not always comfortable, because you have to look at things that maybe aren't working anymore and you have to get honest with yourself. So I think that's why they call it like the dark night of the soul, like but that dark night of the soul could just be like, you know, last for an hour and you come through it. But that's why it's so beautiful to be in nature in a beautiful place where you're supported, where you have body work and you have nurturing food and you have the earth supporting you as well.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting? Like you said, change isn't always comfortable at all, but it actually is easier in a group setting, like when there is this connection, because I'm gonna like from a science perspective, we have, I mean, about mirror neurons. And so when we are in the presence of another person that is also having a breakthrough or an aha or seeing something differently, our brains literally see that, and again it catalyzes something where we open up to a different adaptive state. So that's why you often see in group settings one person will have this aha breakthrough, and then it almost like it creates a safe space and permission, and your brain literally goes, oh, it's okay for me to do that too. So what you may have been looking at or working on forever in your own individual practice or self-reflection can get accessed in a different way when you're in a group of people, because every time someone else is having that change, one, you're getting the message, oh, it's okay for me to do this too. You have the safe environment, and your brain is also wired to mirror what's going on around you and go, oh, like it's okay for me to see things through a different perspective without even having to figure it out. You don't even have to go digging for it. It just is like one of those gifts of being in a group is you get to benefit from that.
Yeah, it just happens.
It just happens. Would you say, I mean, I definitely noticed this, from a facilitator perspective, like when we were in Costa Rica and when I have traveled to other events with friends, there's a type of connection that gets formed that is different than maybe what might take months or years in a day-to-day friendship or relationship. Can you speak to like what you've noticed with that?
Yeah, I think that it's just there's a deeper intimacy in these kind of settings because you can meet people and have surface level conversations, on a day-to-day basis or weekly basis. But when you share space with someone, like in a retreat container for that many days, and you get to witness people being vulnerable and creating change and opening up, and then you're also opening up and being vulnerable. To me, it's just like there's just a deeper connection. You get to know someone on such a deeper level
Yeah.
that that is really getting to know someone.
Hmm. That's what I've noticed, even outside of retreats, but people I've traveled with. I mean, I would say we even created our own mini retreat, just you and I, last spring. We went to a cabin together. And here you live on the other side of the world. We haven't seen each other consistently a lot in person, but there are like connections and bonds and depth that gets formed in those time together. That's just it's really different. Last year, or it was the year before last, I was the first big event I had been to. Like you said, we'd both worked with a company and it facilitated body work where we knew a lot of the people at the event. So it was different. And it was the first thing I had gone to. It was like, I think 700 people there. I didn't know a single soul before going. And I very much was like, okay, I know that sometimes I can get tired in big groups and this can be overwhelming, but I'm really going to have the intention to just say hello and go and start conversations with new people and just enjoy meeting new people in this environment. And the first night after the class, again, it's time that you're not in session, but there were these beautiful like fireplaces outside, and it was a beautiful, lovely evening. And I sat down, and there was this woman sitting by herself, and I was like, "Hi, I'm Emily. What's your name?" And we started talking, and she's now like one of my closest friends. And there were just and who would have thought, but it's that we were in this space, and to take that step of being like, "Hi, this I'm Emily. Who are you?" And that depth of the connection and the relationship is just really different than other people that I've, again, like it's easy to just, I have kids, so I have friends who are moms, but we don't often, you're not in it together going, oh my gosh, what are you learning this? And what ahas have you taken away? It's just not what you do often in everyday conversation. So it's really beautiful to see that you may come to a retreat or a vacation or travel with a friend and those people that you've never met before. It's amazing the connection that you might make with someone like that you wouldn't even if you met them day to day.
Yeah, I feel like it's like you get to know someone on such a deeper level, like when you share space with someone, you know what I mean? Like whether it's you're sharing a room with them or a house, or you're eating breakfast, dinner, and lunch and in a group setting together and going on excursions together. Like there's just like a different level of getting to know each other and intimacy, and your bodies also getting to know each other. And that you just like, I mean, you can't really get to know someone like that just through meeting them randomly every so often at different things.
Yeah.
So there is a kind of sense of like you're again, it's also like a little bit of that co-regulation with your nervous systems as well. Like your nervous systems are co-regulating together, and that's I think that's also really important. That's a really great thing in groups as well, is that our nervous systems get to co-regulate with each other. And if you're someone who's kind of very like I don't know, you kind of lack energy, but then you're around someone who has a lot of energy. You get to balance each other's nervous systems out, which is a beautiful thing. So there's so many things happening, and I think that's why in person is so important. As humans, we crave connection, and we crave physical connection, and it is a beautiful thing when you're like you really get to know someone when you like meet in person, and you
Yeah.
get to share space in body.
And
And
I
that's a
and I
beautiful thing.
and I think, sorry to talk over you.
Yeah,
Um,
I would.
as you say that, I think it has gotten more challenging in our world now to also create intentional time away like that, um, because of how connected we all are, quote, connected, but so much of that is digital or on phones or on computers. And then we all have our daily lives that we're running. And it really is it's a big choice to go, I am going to choose these few days, this week away, and that choice opens up something different because we can try to go, okay, I'm only going to go on my phone. I'm going to take a day off my phone or take take a
Yeah.
morning off my phone. And it's really challenging to do. So I think like being able to really make that devotion to yourself and that time to, I'm going to take time to disconnect from my day to day and open up to this new, maybe it's unfamiliar, maybe I don't know these people or this country I haven't been to, but it wires your system and your body and your heart and your brain to be in an open, expansive, receptive state to something new. And that's where we have the ahas and breakthrough that are going to be a lot harder to access just on our own or in our personal self-reflection.
Well, like all those little things, I call them like micro changes. like not putting my phone on in the morning for the first hour, like all those things. And I really do think those things are really important. And those micro changes lead to
Yeah.
the macro change. But then there's those choices that come along once a year or once every so often where it's like, ooh, I'm gonna do this retreat in Bali, or I'm gonna go to Scotland and I don't know. And that's a big macro change to me.
Mhm.
And like when the Scotland retreat came about, like I said, I didn't know anyone. I didn't know the facilitator. Like I knew nothing, but I was going through a breakup in my relationship. My marriage was over, and I knew I needed something different. And I was used to going to these classes with that you and me used to go to a lot. But like I was just like, no, I need something like totally different. And I didn't know what I was choosing. Like I didn't know where I was going, what I was doing, but I just knew I needed something different. That's all I knew. And I remember when I like paid the down payment or the deposit, I was just like, fuck it. I'm doing this. I don't care. Like, and it was kind of this thing of like now or never. And I was like, I'm just going to commit to it. I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to go. Worst case scenarios, I get there and I hate it. And what? I leave. Like it's not a big deal. And honestly, it was a long journey for me. It was 3 flights to get from Florida to Scotland, and then a 3 hour car journey when I got there. So like it wasn't easy to get there, but oh my God, like was it worth it when I was there? And I say that to people too when they're looking at Bali. I went to Bali this year, and it was a similar, not as similar, but it was also like, oh God. But like the journey, getting there is like the challenging part. Like yeah, it's a long flight. You're going somewhere unknown. It's going to bring up some stuff in your world. You're going to think you're crazy. What are you doing? Your mind's going to want to stop you. Your mind's just trying to protect you because it's trying to keep you safe. And it's reading this thing that is new, is unsafe. But if you know that, I knew enough to not listen to my mind. But I always say like, yeah, it might like take a lot of energy to get there, but once you're there, like what can happen when you're there is incredible. So sometimes it does take like that big choice, that big macro change to make a
Yeah.
big change in your life. Like,
Well, it's like, I've always viewed travel, and the way you described it is really good, as like it creates its own threshold crossing to the event or place you're going to. And I'm sure we've all had this, even if you're just going on vacation, and whether the travel is long or short, it creates a marked like this is the before and this is the after. And I've always loved using that time on the plane, and it might be a really long plane ride, but I notice in that space, I mean, it literally tells your brain and your nervous system, hey, something different is coming, right? And it's like this incubation time. That's why sometimes it feels weird when we're like traveling to somewhere or leaving. Sometimes we have that like, oh no, that's over. But it's, if we look at it from a different perspective of, it's almost like if you have an hour session of any body of work, often there's a beginning like settling space, whether that's okay, what are we here for, what are you asking for, let's settle into the body. And there's also an ending to like a closing of that session, right? And similar to, even if it's like traveling to a retreat, when we use that travel period as a time to, oh cool, this is marking the beginning, you're already in a new frame of mind. I know I've always loved, I get in an airplane, I'm like, oh my God, I feel like I could write like 10, I could start writing a book when I'm on here. And then I watch movies and I get inspired by the movies. And I'm like, just put me on a plane and I'll be more creative than I ever am like sitting in my office. It really does create a different chemistry in the body.
yeah, me too. I love writing when I'm on the plane. I write a
Yeah.
lot when I'm on planes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, the last thing I want to ask you about. So, you guys are listening. If you don't know, Amy and I, we facilitated a retreat together this past November in Costa Rica, and we have one coming up in Bali in September. And for people, we've talked about micro changes and macro changes. For someone that does have a daily practice, and I know you have lots of things you do, can you speak to almost it kind of warms the body up and you up for a bigger trip, is like creating a mini sort of retreat or practice or time for you at home. Um, can you talk a little bit about that, or what you do? Like, say if you know you kind of need a reset, and you're not at the time yet where you're traveling somewhere or going somewhere, is there anything you do to, yes, it's on your own, or maybe it's connected with people, to get that different perspective or reset, or kind of like a mini retreat?
For your like a mini retreat for yourself, like by
Yeah.
yourself kind of thing.
Hmm.
I think my whole life is like a retreat.
You know what's
Honestly,
funny?
my whole life, I live my
Yeah,
daily like I'm always on a retreat.
you leave me messages and you're like, and I'm walking in the forest with the dog, and I'm like, yeah,
I'm gonna go for a bath after this. Like, I'm going to yoga. Like, yeah, like yeah, that's why I'm like, I don't know how to answer this question because I kind of live every day like this. But I suppose, yeah, like introducing into your day those to me, like, it's actually really important. Like I've crafted my life in a way in my day every day in a way that there's always time in my day for me to take care of me. Whether it's like get up in the morning and do a little bit of movement before my day begins, even if it's 5 minutes, you know what I mean? Like 5 minutes of just like stretching. I have like angel cards that I love, like tarot cards. I'll pull a card for the day. I'll write down on a quick piece of paper like what I want to accomplish for the day. I love to do this, like what are 3 things that by the end of the day I'll feel great that I've accomplished. And then that could be just like things with your business or with your day-to-day life. And then I'll also write down how do I want to feel today? And like I even have it in front of me, like today's one. And it's like, I want to feel confident, creative, have ideas coming true. I even wrote down unexpected revenue. Like, and I'll write these things down because I find the power of writing. I've been writing and journaling since like I've been 20. And honestly, I go back and I look at anything I wrote down, I always create it. So just like little practices like that. And then yeah, nature is really important for me. Getting out in nature, especially when I work online and I work on a computer, I have to make sure to take care of my body and take breaks and get out in nature. I don't know, does that answer your question?
totally. And I think what's interesting is, I think it might be hard for you to answer because you're just embodying it. You're like, well, wait, I do I do this most days. And it's funny because, we titled the retreat The Embodied Woman, because I think a lot of us can resonate. I know I've been there. I can take in a lot of information in my brain, and think about it and like extrapolate in my head. But until we embody something, it is a very different experience of integrating whatever that is. It could be a piece of information, it could be a practice, it could be an idea. And I think also like the power of taking intentional time away allows you to integrate and embody things that then it's easier to take back with you into your daily life. Because yeah, I get where you're like, well, I don't know how to answer that. And I was thinking that I knew I was going to ask you that question. And I was like, huh, how do I create mini retreats? And then I also didn't realize this, but I was like, oh, every Sunday I have a morning yoga class I love going to. And my girls are at the age now that they're sleeping, so I know I have the whole morning to myself. And I was like, oh, I wake up, and again, I kind of do an opening like you do. I do an opening to my day. Like I always do a bit of breath work. And then I go to this, I move my body. So in this day, it's like class. And then I know I can come back and have another hour or two before anyone wakes up in the house. And that's the time where I often will find myself writing or creating something or reading a book. And I'm like, oh, I've actually didn't think I was intentionally doing that, but that's my every week. I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait for Sunday. It's so good. And I think that's a lot of what, you know, I would say, and I'd love to hear you say that, my like one of my intentions for this retreat is creating everything we've talked about, that like this safe space that people can come where you and I, it's like that's our job as facilitators, is to show up for you and take care of it so that you can go, oh, it's okay to like let everything go and be receptive to anything coming in. And then to share this embodied knowledge of this is what you can craft your life to look at like. You can feel this present in your body and alive in your day to day, especially when you have a week to go. Oh, it like downloads in your system and your brain in a completely different way, which is what I'm really excited about because that you can't get that
Yeah.
online in my
And
opinion.
even like there's a girl who was at the Costa Rica retreat with us and she loved the movement classes that I did there. And she's like like a really like she's a single mother, but then also like works in law. Like I think it's law. But anyway, it's a really big corporate job. So like she's like full on corporate boss woman. And now since she loved the movement and now she's doing my online movement series and she's bringing it into her home and now she has this practice for her. So that's where I do see what you're saying. It's like when you're in this container for 7 days and like it really is like you're supported from the minute you wake up with well, actually, from the minute you get there, we arrange your transport for you. You get to this incredible resort on the hills in Northwest Bali that is like so, oh my God, so just like healing and nurturing. You wake up to a nurturing like breakfast, and then we have like breath work and movement and time in nature, and there's a spa, and you get massages, and there's hot infrared sauna and a cold plunge and then we have a nurturing dinner. Like it's like how you want to live your life. You get to have it here in this like container for all these days. And then it's so much easier when you go back to your life to integrate this into your life.
Absolutely. It's like a kickstart to going, well, I'd like to, how often we go, I'd like to have that, but I'm just
Yeah.
too busy or I don't have access to it. And then all of a sudden, once it's like once you get a taste of it, then you know it. You know it, your body knows it, and it's like, oh, okay. And we value it in a different way too, because we've experienced it.
Yeah. It's like you've had the visceral real life experience, then you can't really go back to how you
Yeah.
used to do life.
Thank goodness. That's a good thing.
Yeah. And
Uh,
then I just want to end with this. Like I also feel like what like that does, like being in a space like that for that many days, like it actually rewires, like you've talked about, like your neural pathways, but it also like rewires your body. Like it heals your nervous system. So your nervous system will be different afterwards. So you'll actually be able to hear your body in a different type of way. So embodying, the movement, the breath, the practices, like that just happens naturally because it just does. Like you don't have to, it doesn't become like a force for you to do these things anymore. It's just more like you can't not hear your body. So like my body's so loud now, like the tiniest thing could be off with it and I'll be like, oh, that's off. And then that's when it's like, okay, mini retreat time, like go to the yoga class, go out in nature, do some breath work, change, you know, maybe you need to change your diet a little bit, like whatever that is. Go to bed a little bit earlier, like making those micro changes because you can hear your body. You're
yeah.
not waiting until your body gets sick to make the changes. You're hearing it way back before that.
Well, when you say that, it reminds me of it's much easier to tune into you, like back in the days where there used to be radio. You know how you'd go in between between stations and there'd be static? But it's like when you have an extended period of time when you're on the station of you and it's really clear and there's not the outside noise, then when you start to hear the static, you're way more aware of it. And you also know, like, oh, this is how I dial back in to me. And that's just harder to do when we're at home because we might go, oh, yeah, I feel really good and present. And then we do just have all the things in our repetitive, habitual life and triggers that will kick us back out of that state. And it's not that we're ever going to be there 100% of the time, but having an extended period where it's designed for you to be able to switch off of on mode, like you get to just be held and taken care of and supported, then when you hear that and you're in line with that like frequency of you, it's much easier to hear when you're not. You're like, oh, I know this one. I can come back here and I can come back here.
Hmm. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, this was really awesome. Thank you for coming on. And if you guys are listening, if Bali is in your world, but you're not sure or you have questions about it, DM Amy or I, on Facebook and Instagram. We'll put links below. I'll put a link to the page where you can see what the 7 days in Bali are like. And like Amy said, we are really here to help you book the tickets, like help you get, like, we get you to the resort, all of that. But we're here for any questions along the way too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I hope you got something out of that episode. If you like this podcast, please share it with someone you know who'd find it useful or interesting, and subscribe so that you can listen to past and upcoming shows.